Imagine a journalist obtains highly intimate, stolen photographs of a public figure and publishes them. Depending on the jurisdiction, this act might face no penalty, yet professional standards condemn it. Now flip the scenario. A journalist leaks strictly confidential, classified state documents to expose massive government corruption. The state will prosecute this as a crime, yet the public interest demands it be known. The actions that cause severe personal damage are often shielded by the law, while the reporting that provides the greatest civic benefit is often criminalized. This tension exists because ethics and law operate on different axes. Ethics serves as a system for evaluating motives and values. It is a voluntary moral compass, guiding behavior when no authority is watching. Law, by contrast, is a mandatory set of rules enacted by a sovereign authority. It focuses on the strict consequences of an action and guarantees penalties if broken. This diagram shows the division between illegal and unethical acts. Because legislation cannot anticipate every conceivable dilemma a broadcaster or writer might face, a massive gray area exists where the media must rely entirely on independent self-regulation. The written statutes merely set the enforceable floor of acceptable societal conduct. Ethics demands a higher standard. To maintain credibility with the public, the press requires independent oversight rather than direct state control. Former Press Council of India chairperson Justice Markandeya Kachu emphasized that the media should be regulated by an independent body rather than dictated to by the government. Self-regulation remains the ideal state, but when voluntary codes fail to protect individuals from genuine harm, the state must step in with formal, codified law. The legislature sets these fixed boundaries, debating and drafting the specific rules that determine the minimum standards for society. However, applying those rigid textual rules to complex, evolving human behavior falls entirely on the judicial system. Judges face a distinct problem. They must enforce highly subjective concepts like decency and morality without violating the constitutional right to free expression. To solve this, the Supreme Court of India engineered an objective, 7-step legal framework to map the exact boundary between protected free expression and illegal obscenity. The first step in building this legal framework requires isolating the exact definitions of contested terms. Vulgarity refers to material that causes disgust, revulsion, or even boredom. Making someone cringe is perfectly legal. This diagram illustrates the legal hierarchy. Vulgarity sits outside. Indecency occupies the broad outer ring, failing current standards. It crosses into the smaller obscenity ring only if it possesses the active tendency to corrupt minds. At the absolute core lies pornography, obscenity in an aggravated form. The state does not intervene simply because a viewer feels uncomfortable or offended. Criminal penalties apply exclusively when the material degrades societal morals. In 1965, a bookseller was prosecuted for selling D.H. Lawrence's novel, Lady Chatterley's Lover, in the case of Ranjit Udeshi versus State of Maharashtra. The Supreme Court used this case to formally adopt the Hicklin test, a standard originally imported from 19th century English jurisprudence. The Hicklin test had a massive mechanical flaw. It judged publications by their effect on the most vulnerable person, filtering out almost all complex material. This approach ignored what the courts later termed contemporary standards. Interestingly, the exact same novel was acquitted by a jury in England around the same time, proving that obscenity is culturally and temporally relative. By evaluating a nationwide publication against the sensibilities of a highly susceptible child, the state reduced all reading material to the level of a nursery, enforcing massive censorship on adult citizens. The Hicklin test operated as a poorly designed legal code that threatened constitutional free expression, forcing the judiciary to patch the system. The necessary correction arrived with the Samaresh Bose case in 1985, which evaluated a challenged Bengali novel and effectively discarded the old standard. The Supreme Court introduced the likely audience test. A judge must now assess the specific demographic targeted by the work, rather than an accidental reader. They combined this with the ordinary man test. The material's impact is judged by how a reasonable adult perceives it, removing the hypersensitive outlier from the equation. These updated metrics were applied to mainstream cinema, notably in the Raj Kapoor case concerning the film Satyam Shivan Sundaram. The court ruled that films targeting adult audiences must be granted the latitude to balance artistic expression with commercial entertainment within reasonable norms of decency. By shifting the baseline measurement from the weakest possible outlier to the intended target demographic, the court established a legal safeguard for adult entertainment. The courts then established specific exceptions, beginning with literary merit. If a work possesses significant artistic value, that merit can outweigh its explicit content. They also introduced the work as a whole principle. Censors cannot legally isolate a single out-of-context scene to ban an entire piece of media. This principle protects documentary filmmakers, like Anand Patwardhan, whose work relies on showing raw, unfiltered realities in their full context to properly inform public opinion. The ultimate stress test for these context exceptions arrived in 1996 with the film Bandit Queen, which depicted graphic violence against Phoolan Devi. The Supreme Court applied the aversion defense. This test dictates that if a depiction of violence generates revulsion and social condemnation, it cannot cause sexual titillation. Because the depictions in Bandit Queen generated aversion rather than arousal, the film failed the legal requirement for corrupting its audience. The context of the violence dictated its legality. The courts have continuously reinforced these protections. In the K.A. Abbas case, the Supreme Court established that the state cannot use the threat of a hostile public reaction as an excuse to suppress constitutional free speech. When evaluating visual arts, the Delhi High Court ruled in favor of painter M.F. Hussain, concluding that nudity within an artistic tradition is protected and does not automatically constitute obscenity. And in the S. Khushbu case, the Supreme Court proved that an individual merely expressing an unpopular opinion regarding sexual morality is engaging in protected speech, not criminal conduct. This matrix tracks 8 landmark cases against the 7 obscenity tests. Whether documentaries, paintings, or opinions, these diverse expressions survive the Supreme Court's filter. Despite causing offense, none met the threshold of corrupting a reasonable adult audience. The legal apparatus in India is no longer designed to shield the most sensitive citizens from discomfort. Over the last 6 decades, the jurisprudence of obscenity has actively expanded the operational space for journalists and artists, prioritizing constitutional expression over enforced moral standards.